Daniel sat in the corner of a small café, his daughter's notebook open on the table as he guided her through her math problems. The warm smell of coffee filled the air, and for a moment, it felt like an ordinary afternoon. But his attention was pulled to the young woman sitting alone at the next table. Her fingers trembled as she held her cup, barely taking a sip, her eyes flicking toward the door again and again, as if she were measuring the distance between her chair and freedom. There was a man across from her, speaking in a low, firm tone that carried an edge of control. Daniel noticed the way her shoulders stiffened at every word he said, the way her hand flinched when he leaned too close. She wasn't just nervous, she was afraid. Daniel's daughter followed his gaze and whispered softly, "Daddy," she looked scared. The words cut through him. It wasn't just his instincts anymore, even his little girl could see it. He thought about looking away, about minding his own business like everyone else in the cafe was doing. But something inside him wouldn't let him. He realized he was watching more than a conversation, he was witnessing someone silently pleading for help. Every glance toward the exit was a desperate wish to leave. Daniel took a deep breath, his heart heavy with the weight of choice. In that quiet cafe, he knew he couldn't ignore what he saw. Compassion was calling him to act. Daniel shifted in his seat, pretending to stay focused on his daughter's homework, but his eyes kept drifting back. The man across from the young woman leaned forward, his voice low but sharp, his jaw tight with authority. She nodded quickly at everything he said, her hands clasped tightly in her lap now, as if even holding the coffee cup had been too much. Daniel caught the flicker in her eyes, fear mixed with longing. Every few seconds she glanced at the exit, her chest rising and falling too quickly, as if she were rehearsing an escape she didn't dare make. When she shifted slightly in her chair, the man's hand shot out, gripping her wrist in a way that made her flinch. It was subtle enough that no one else seemed to notice, but Daniel saw it. His stomach clenched. "Daddy," his daughter whispered again, tugging at his sleeve. "She looks like she wants to cry." Her innocent words confirmed what he already knew, this wasn't just an uncomfortable date or an argument. This was someone trapped. Daniel looked around the cafe. People were scrolling on their phones, lost in their own worlds, not paying attention. He felt the weight of silence pressing in on him. He could stay quiet, pretend it wasn't his problem, but he remembered his daughter's small voice, the hope in the young woman's eyes each time she looked toward the door. Daniel knew then that he had to do something. Daniel's heart pounded as he stood up, steadying himself with a calmness he didn't quite feel. He walked over to the woman's table, putting on the warmest smile he could muster. "Hey," he said brightly, as if greeting an old friend. "It's been such a long time, ready to head out?" For a moment, confusion flickered across her face. Then, like a spark catching fire, she understood. Her eyes widened, filling with relief, and she nodded quickly. Yes, I'm ready." Her voice trembled, but it was strong enough to carry hope. The man across from her stiffened, his grip tightening on her wrist. "She's not going anywhere," he said sharply, his eyes narrowing at Daniel. But Daniel didn't flinch. He gently placed his hand on the back of the woman's chair and shifted it slightly, creating space between her and the man. "She's with me," Daniel said firmly, his tone steady, protective. His daughter, still sitting at their table, watched with wide eyes but gave him a small, brave nod, as if lending him strength. The man hesitated, caught off guard by Daniel's confidence and the public setting. A few customers finally looked up, sensing tension. The woman seized the moment, pulling her wrist free and standing beside Daniel. Daniel smiled reassuringly. "Come on, let's go." He guided her toward the door, each step breaking the invisible chains she'd been bound by. His daughter quickly gathered their things, ready to follow her dad's quiet act of courage. As they stepped toward the door, the cafe seemed to grow silent, every sound muffled beneath the weight of the moment. The woman clutched her bag tightly, her knuckles pale, as if it held the last piece of her courage. Daniel walked beside her with steady, unhurried steps, his calmness shielding her from the storm behind them. His daughter hurried to his other side, slipping her small hand into his, silently proud to be part of something bigger than herself. The man rose halfway from his seat, his glare burning into them, but the presence of other customers watching now pinned him in place. He muttered something under his breath, but he didn't follow. The woman glanced back just once, then quickly turned forward, her pace quickening as if the very act of walking out the door was her victory. Outside, the cool air wrapped around her like freedom itself. She stopped just beyond the cafe entrance, her chest heaving as if she had been holding her breath for years. Tears welled in her eyes, spilling down her cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered hoarsely, her voice breaking. You have no idea what you just saved me from." Daniel shook his head gently. "You don't owe me anything. You were brave enough to stand up when you had the chance." His daughter squeezed the woman's hand softly, looking up with innocent certainty. "Now you're free," she said. And in that moment, the woman truly believed it. Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out a small piece of paper, scribbling his phone number on it with a borrowed pen. He handed it to the woman with a steady hand. "If you ever need help, a safe place to call, anything at all, just reach out. You're not alone anymore." His words carried no judgment, only kindness, and that was what broke her. She pressed the paper against her chest as if it were a lifeline. His daughter stood close, her eyes bright and full of empathy far beyond her years. She gave the woman's hand a gentle squeeze and whispered, "You're really strong." The woman let out a soft laugh through her tears, a sound fragile but full of hope, as if a weight she had carried for too long had finally begun to lift. The street was quiet around them, but inside her heart, there was a storm of relief and possibility. She looked at Daniel, a stranger who had stepped in when no one else did, and at his daughter who had seen her fear with such innocent clarity. For the first time in what felt like forever, she believed she could walk forward without chains. She took a deep breath, nodded firmly, and whispered, "I won't forget this." Then she walked away, not with hesitation, but with purpose, her steps carrying her toward freedom. Daniel watched her disappear into the distance, his daughter leaning against his side. He smiled softly, knowing sometimes the greatest heroism lies in simple compassion.